You believe the polls, Bernie Sanders is surging. The Vermont senator in a virtual tie with Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire, which people expected, but also in Iowa. Is he for real, or is the media making too much of this? Jeannie, polling traditionally, is it reflective of reality in Iowa and New Hampshire? Do they tend to have it right?
Some of the polls do, and the polls you're talking about, they do have a good history. And so that's what I think has the Clinton campaign a little bit uneasy. But we've seen this. You go back a few weeks and you hear her campaign manager trying to lower expectations and say, look, these are going to be tough states for us, the two early ones, not just New Hampshire, as you mentioned, but also Iowa. Because I do think that there is a real fear there that she could potentially either lose Iowa or not do as well as they expected. So they want to make sure that they manage that. And I think the question now is she going to repeat what Bill Clinton did and be the only Democratic nominee in modern history to lose both Iowa and New Hampshire and go on to capture the nomination? I think she can. But I do think, you know, look, this is a process. This is a calendar.
Yeah,
and so Iowa impacts New Hampshire.
Any ammunition, financial or otherwise, in the primary process.
Yeah.
But Dominic, why? I mean, yes, New Hampshire for obvious reasons. It's a neighboring state to Vermont here. Sanders is a known commodity. I get all that. But why has she not already, if not lapped the field, put more distance between herself and Sanders?
Well, let's keep in mind that Iowa, Richard, and New Hampshire doesn't really reflect the demographics of America. So let's keep that in mind, okay? Translation, what I'm saying, whenever you introduce black voters, Hillary Clinton does a whole lot better, okay? So that's number one. Number two, she has not run the greatest campaign. No. She's very guarded. She's not considered great on the stump. She's no Bill Clinton on the stump. And so for a number of factors, and then when you consider her high negatives, a lot of people, for whatever reason, A, don't trust her or just don't like her.
You know, it's funny. Somebody said this weekend, Andrew, what's Hillary Clinton saying she'd do if she was elected? And I had to think about it, you know, and I said, well, she'd have a different foreign policy than the one we're used to, but, and if you think about it, she's had a while now to lay out her vision and why she should get, you know, the big chair in the Oval Office. She's consciously chosen not to do that right now and kind of said, here's my resume. You all know it by now. I'm not as crazy as those other guys. And a socialist, really? I think she's going to win. I don't think any of us at the table would bet against her. But as Dominic said, she not only hasn't run the greatest campaign, she hasn't given a narrative as to why.
Well, she's run something of a Rose Garden strategy, and really, why would you put forth any more energy than you really need to at this point in the race? And before we start, you know, talking about the severity of how bad this might be, yeah, she's probably going to lose New Hampshire, but she still has to lose. I mean, the only way this is problematic is if she does lose both, and then you start getting the narrative about 2 losses in a row, and that will artificially build up the Sanders momentum.
Let's say she loses both, okay? Hypothetically, she loses both. Is it still never mind, or do people all of a sudden, with some money, say, well, I'm going to hedge my bets here a little bit? Do people start taking a look at Sanders a little more seriously? I know he's not going to do well probably in South Carolina or Super Tuesday and the rest. I know how the math and the map works, but does he get a longer second look from folks?
I think he'll get a longer second look from the media more than the money. I mean, the smart money is still on Hillary to win the nomination, and for good reason. I mean, it would be one of the more dramatic upsets we've seen in the primary process in our history if Sanders gets the nomination over Clinton at this point. Yeah, I don't think the money's going to go anywhere. But of course, the media will be all over the place, and you'll get about 2 weeks of is this Bernie-mentum time.
Look, so Dominic, we got to go back to what Dominic said because this is absolutely correct. Iowa and New Hampshire are white voters. Most of the Democratic primary in both those states are going to be either college-oriented whites, young people, older whites who are sort of much more to the left than even sort of the center of the Democratic Party. You get to South Carolina and you get to Nevada and you start bringing in the Democratic coalition.
You're saying they're white.
They're very white. They're, you know, Subaru Outback driving, Birkenstock wearing liberals. And that's a big part of the Democratic base, but that is not what brings you to the dance in a Democratic nominating contest. These are professors. No, Janie, no, present company excluded. These are professors. These are not sort of black Latino Democrats who make or break candidates in a nominating contest.
If we've learned anything by this election season that already seems like it's 2 years old, is that if you're Trump and you say stuff the media will run with it, and you'll get free coverage. You'll get the narrative becomes reality, even if it's not. Does it run a risk that all of a sudden, you know, in South Carolina, the rest is saying, well, who is this guy? Let's check him out. He'll be the profile piece on
there you go.
60 Minutes.
Once that happens, there's a very strong likelihood that Bernie Sanders wins New Hampshire. I think the race is tighter than the Clinton folks want it to be in Iowa right now. But once that happens, let's say he wins those two. What do you know about Bernie Sanders' personal life? He's not been vetted in the way that Hillary Clinton has. Once he wins a contest or two, it's a very different ballgame on the examination from the media. Now you want to know where you were born, who you were born to, what your mother did, what your father did, your siblings, your children, your ex-wives. It'll be a very different, you'll start to learn a little bit more about Bernie Sanders. I'm not saying there's things out there, but you don't know much about Bernie other than his message, because he's been really good on message.
And I think if that happens, you also will really start to see the crescendo of the debate about socialist. And what exactly does socialist mean?
Okay,
what is a democratic
I'll
socialist?
make a counter narrative. And while I think she's going to win. I think if South Carolina begins in Nevada and the rest, to your guy's point, you get different hues of the Democratic spectrum that are going to vote in these places. But what happened on the right? All of a sudden, folks said they're going to tap into some anger out there. He can tap in, and if he goes, he doubles down in terms of income inequality, and he's the guy, and he's going to go after Wall Street or whatever else. Now maybe we misread the base on the left. Maybe they're frustrated too. I mean, is there a chance that he can tap into some of the same stuff that's on the other side, which will be the worst thing for her, even if she wins, because then she's going farther and farther from the middle, which is where she wanted to stay?
First of all, there is not as much anger on the left, and also I would just take a step back and I say, you know, Trump does tap into the anger and the media follows him. We don't know yet whether voters are going to follow him, and I think that's a big if. But if you look at Iowa, one big question about Bernie Sanders, yes, he's scoring points in polls, but he now has to get these people out to those caucuses. A lot of his support, as Mike mentioned, young people. They tend not to want to go out on a cold night and sit in a gym somewhere for 3 hours and say yes, yes to Bernie Sanders. So
you're making
it's a big,
sound glamorous.
but it's a big question. Yeah. Can he get these? It's just like the Trump question. Are these people who tend not to vote in primaries and caucuses because turnout is very low going to suddenly show us all up and say, oh, we're going to get out this year? I don't know that you're going to see that. So that's a big question.
All right. Well, on the other side of this break, a fascinating story if you saw it, and we'll be speaking with him tomorrow. Congressman Steve Israel. If you're on Long Island, you know him as certainly an elected there, but for a lot of folks who didn't know him and saw his piece, his editorial this weekend, it was an eye-opener as to what is Washington, and he explains why he's not running for another term. He talks about a system that, frankly, he can't wait to get away from.